Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? We retell those moments honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. Rain stitched the city into a single gray sheet. From the kitchen window of 1310 Pine Street, apartment 4B, the rooftops were a shallow sea and the crosswalks shone like fish scales. On the counter, my blue-rimmed mug sat with a bite-shaped chip along its lip. It fit my thumb perfectly when I steadied my hands. The key hooks by the door were empty. 4 brass mouths, no teeth. The bedroom lock clicked from the other side. One small sound, enough to raise heat in my face. "Daniel," I said already at the door. "Daniel, open it." His voice came through the wood, low and tight. "Mom, please, not today." "Not today what?" My palm pressed flat to the panel. It felt cool and slightly tacky from lemon oil. "What is this?" "Do not provoke her," he said. A pause, like he was choosing which words would make less trouble. "Sloan is trying. We are all trying. Just stay in your room. I'll be back after my shift. You locked me in my own house. It's safer." His steps faded down the hall. Keys jangled. The apartment door opened, then shut. The lock in the front door caught with an honest, heavy sound. I stood there and listened to the rain. The lemon in the air was too clean. It came from the way Sloan cleaned with her sleeves rolled and her eyes on corners. I used to notice small kindnesses. A folded dish towel. A hand on my elbow when I stepped off the curb. Then those same hands moved my spices, threw out my curtains, set my bills to autopay under her email. "Let me streamline the kitchen," she had said. "At your age, less clutter helps." She said it with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. I checked the window latch, the balcony, the closets. The old cane that had belonged to Frank stood by the hall closet. He used it in the last summer before his chest gave out, resting it across his knees when he watched the Mariners and fell asleep before the 7th-inning stretch. I kept it because I liked how the wood had darkened where his hand once sat. Now it looked like a prop someone had placed in a courtroom. The doorbell camera's little red ring had been dead since Sloan arrived. "It keeps sinking wrong," she said, boxing it up and sliding it into a drawer. "We do not need it. I am here. I will answer the door." 2 months before, they had moved in with 2 suitcases and a borrowed toolbox. Their lease had imploded under a layoff and a rent hike. "Just until we get back on our feet," Daniel said. That first night, Sloan kissed my cheek and called me Evelyn like it was a ribbon. "Your home is so warm," she said, and then stood in my kitchen and measured my life with her eyes. The next day, my coffee tasted of bleach because she had scrubbed the carafe until the plastic clouded. The day after that, she took my grocery list and moved my spices to the high cabinet. "For flow," she said, smiling. "Efficient kitchens have zones." The first time her elbow caught my wrist, the coffee sloshed and a red oval rose on my skin. She stared at it and breathed through her nose. "See? This is why we keep things simple." When Daniel came home, he docked his phone and kissed her, and looked at me like my story was not a story, but a shape he could not quite see. "It was probably an accident," he said. He did not touch the burn. The bedroom walls held sound like a glass holds a flame. I heard the dull daily music of our place. Refrigerator hum, rain on the fire escape, water running in the bathroom down the hall. The faint radio and Sloan's voice even when she was not speaking. I sank to the bed and counted my breaths and the seconds between the radiator clicks. Underfoot, the plank floor had a loose board near the dresser. When I stepped there, it chirped. We had laughed about that once. Frank had stepped around it for 20 years. I never fixed it. Around noon, Sloan came down the hall. Her steps were sharp, lined up like stitches. The lock turned and the door opened wide enough to frame her. She held a saucer with my blue mug on it, steam leafing up from tea the color of weak honey. "I thought you could use something warm," she said. Her nails were neutral and neat. The soft gray sweater made her look like a silver portrait. "Where are my keys?" I asked. Not a question so much as a stake in the ground. Her mouth curved. "It could be called kind if you were not standing in front of it. You misplace them. Often. Daniel said it would calm things down if we kept them safe. My keys belong on my wall, and they will be there when it makes sense." She stepped 1 foot into the room, set the saucer on my dresser, and breathed out like this was charity. "Have you eaten? I can put together a plate. It is important to keep your blood sugar stable. I will fix something. Let me." She looked past me at the tidy bed, the framed wedding picture, the old quilt folded at the footboard. Her eyes touched each thing and weighed it. "Daniel is worried. I am worried too. You have been confused. We want to protect you." "I am not confused." She tilted her head, listening like a nurse listens when she does not trust a patient's answer. "We can talk later. Rest for now." The door closed and the lock gave that soft, private sound. I carried the mug to the window and watched the buses angle up Pine. Faces blurred behind fogged glass. A woman held a yellow umbrella against the rain and dragged a small dog in a blue sweater. The city was a stranger and familiar the way a person is when they have changed hair and kept their voice. I tried the knob again. Nothing. The closet hung with raincoats and the winter parka that smelled faintly of cedar chips. In the top shelf was a shoebox with old birthday cards. I took it down and found a single spare key at the bottom taped to a folded grocery receipt from 2011. The tape had dried to a brittle glaze. When I tried it in the lock, it fit, then refused to turn. In the kitchen, a pan sizzled. Sloane hummed something tuneless. She had started to wear my apron like it had always been hers. She spoke on the phone often, but with the voice she used when she wanted to sound like cotton. "Hi, Mrs. Adler," I heard once. "Evelyn is resting. The doctor says fewer visits will help her recover." There had been no doctor. On Tuesday evenings, she would open my mail on the couch. Statement past due. "Let me take this off your plate," she would say. She took my checkbook the way a person takes a heavy box from your hands. She did not give it back. The apartment door opened after 2. Daniel's shoes sighed on the mat. Keys set down on the console with a skitter. Sloane's voice rolled toward him soft around the edges. "She's in her room. I brought tea. She needs quiet." "Okay." His voice was a tired thing. "Okay." He stood in my doorway later, touching the frame like it was a reluctant friend. His eyes were damp around the rims, like he was fighting a wind. "Mom," he said, "please let Sloane help. She knows this stuff." "What stuff is that?" "She has a finance degree. She understands systems. She is protecting you." From what I asked. "From stress," he said, like saying it would make it become true. "From mistakes. My life is not a spreadsheet." "I know." He glanced back down the hall where her shadow moved across the kitchen wall. "We will talk after work tomorrow." "Unlock the door." His throat worked. He lifted his hand and then lowered it. "I will be back," he said instead, and left. Evening came with a bruised light. A siren slipped down the street and tilted away. The refrigerator coughed and fell silent. I held the chipped mug until the heat was gone and the tea tasted like a wet coin. Past midnight, the building made its set of nocturnal sounds. Pipes lived and breathed. The couple upstairs laughed too loud at something short on television, then went quiet. In the corridor, rain tapped the fire door like small fingers. Water ran again in the bathroom. A phone lit the hall with a thin white square. Sloane's voice was whisper soft. The whisper made everything she said feel more true. "Tuesday," she said. 3 in the afternoon, a beat, yes. Dr. Whitaker will handle the rest." The phone light went out. The hallway went dark. I stared at the empty key hooks until my eyes watered, and the brass mouths blurred into one bright smudge. Rain threaded the window. The apartment held its breath. By morning, the rain had softened into a steady hush that filled the gaps between sounds. I woke to the sweet sting of lemon cleaner and the faintest click in the hall. Sloane moved like a metronome. Cupboard, drawer, fridge, plate, each noise flat and precise, like she had measured how much sound a kitchen should make. I dressed and smoothed the quilt, then pressed my ear to the door. There was no footstep on the other side. I tried the knob. The lock held. The blue mug waited on the dresser. The chip caught the light and threw a small bright tooth onto the wall. I lifted it and tasted lukewarm tea that had gone thin. I set it back and looked at the wedding photo. Frank's tie was crooked. He had laughed about it all day, said it made him look like a boy who had stolen a grown man's suit. I touched the glass and told myself to think. The closet gave me a cardigan and a pair of walking shoes. It did not give me an answer. The only answer here sat with my keys, and my keys had been moved out of my life and into Sloane's idea of what my life should be. The lock turned. Sloane opened the door with a smile and a plate of toast cut into neat triangles. Steam from her mug drifted around her head and smelled like chamomile. "Good morning." She looked beyond me before she looked at me the way a realtor looks at a room. "You slept?" I listened, I said. "To the rain." She moved the mug from the dresser to the nightstand as if arranging set pieces. "Daniel is coming home early. I want today to be calm. I need you to meet me in the kitchen in 10 minutes so I can go over some housekeeping. We will keep things orderly. That helps." "I am not a house to be kept," I said. She did not blink. 10 minutes. She shut the door. The lock again. The sound of a boundary made with a small metal tooth. I counted to 300. At 180, I stopped and pulled the bottom drawer of the dresser. Socks folded by me, refolded by her, a tin of buttons, a roll of tape. I opened the top drawer in the middle. I reached under the bed for the shoebox where I keep receipts I cannot throw away. The paper smelled faintly of dust and plastic. At the bottom, under a birthday card from my sister with a sunflower on it, lay a small stack of my mail. I had not put it there. I took it to the light. Envelopes slit clean, statements, utilities, bank notices, fees I did not remember, a transfer of $42.75 to a name I did not know, another of $60, notes in the margin in a hand that was not mine, paid, scheduled, auto. A drop of anger landed inside me and spread warm and slow. I slid the papers back into the box, put the box back, and walked to the door. I knocked once. The door opened as if she had waited for the sound. "Kitchen," she said. "We need to make a plan." The kitchen had been emptied of my color. The sunflower magnets were gone from the fridge. The curtains had been replaced with a beige that did not let the day in. On the counter, my spice rack sat, with its labels turned away. Sloan had divided the countertops into lanes like traffic and set my life to move through them one way. She put a folder on the table. "Here," she said. "I took care of the utilities. Your internet was almost cut. I saved you fees. These are my papers," I said. "You do not go through my mail." She set her finger on the folder as if she were calming a skittish animal. "You have been stressed. When people are stressed, they make mistakes. We want to keep you safe." I looked past her to the key hooks by the door and felt the blank where the brass should hang. "Give me my keys." She did not even look. "They are safe. That is what matters. What matters is that they are mine." Her smile softened at the edges as if she could shape the air with it. "I understand this feels like a loss of control. It is uncomfortable. Let me shoulder some of it. That is what family does." "My sister is family," I said. She called. I answered. I told her the doctor said fewer visits for now. Sloan lifted a hand without looking and turned off the kettle before it sang. She was very understanding. "There is no doctor." Sloan poured hot water over a tea bag and watched the color bloom. "We will talk about that this afternoon. Please do not agitate Daniel. He has enough on his plate." "How kind of you to manage his plate." I took the folder and drew it toward me, my name printed at the top of forms I had not signed, a new login I did not recognize, a cheerful note in blue ink in her hand, consolidated, easy. A week earlier, I had reached into the cabinet for the coffee tin and hit her elbow where she had no reason to be. The mug tipped and the coffee ran down my wrist in a hot brown ribbon. She had taken my arm and turned it toward the light and stared at the skin like a scientist. "See," she said very softly, "you make a mess when you push yourself." When Daniel came home, he had kissed her and looked at the pink patch on my skin as if it were a thing that had happened somewhere else. Now she took my wrist again, but in a different way, as if it belonged to her. She placed my hand back on the table and pushed the folder closer. "Sign here. It authorizes me to pay the recurring bills. I do not authorize you to breathe for me. We have to be practical." She tapped the page where my name waited. "The world is easier when bills are paid on time. I have never missed a bill. You did not miss one. You almost missed one. I caught it. That is what I am trying to show you." She slid a pen across the table. I did not touch it. Something in my face must have changed because she pulled the pen back with 2 fingers and stood. "I will bring yogurt," she said. "We can circle back. Daniel will help you see reason." When she left the room, I breathed and then opened the folder farther. Beneath the statements lay a different stack, copies of documents, the title to my apartment with a pale stamp in the corner from the county clerk, a loose sheet with numbers written across the top in her hand. 285,000, 275,000, 290,000. Words circled. Cash, fast close. A business card clipped to the corner with a tiny brass clip. Brooke Archer, Riverfront Realty, the font clean and self-possessed. The Archer matched Sloan's maiden name. The bathroom came alive down the hall. Water struck tile. The door to the hall bathroom stuck a little when it swelled, then thumped when you shut it. That sound now. Thump. Water. I put the title back in the stack and then changed my mind. I took my phone and photographed each page, careful not to cast a shadow. The photos blinked into being small black rectangles of proof. I replaced everything exactly how I had found it. When Sloane came back with yogurt and a red cloth napkin, my hands were flat on the table and my face was the face I wore when I waited for night shifts to end. "Eat," she said. She folded the napkin and set it under the small glass bowl. "Protein keeps your mood even." "Brooke is your cousin," I said. I did not make it a question. She is a professional who can give me a read of the market. Sloane lifted a spoon of yogurt toward me. "For emergencies." "What emergency do you imagine?" She took the spoon back to her own mouth and smiled through it. "You are having a difficult period. We have to make hard choices sometimes. We do not need to explain everything to everyone." I pictured the camera doorbell in the drawer with its small red ring asleep. I pictured the wall that backed up to the neighbor's place, the wall that carried cooking smells and laughter and the thump of a dropped book. Nora's television often murmured at night. Once, she had left a pie at my door and tucked a note under the plate. "Welcome to the building, dear. Tea sometime." Sloane turned the radio on. Soft jazz filled the kitchen like a fog that finished sentences for her. The landline sat squat and silent on the sideboard. I went to it and pressed my sister's number on muscle memory. The line blinked without tone, a dead thing pretending to listen. "I canceled it," Sloane said without looking up. "We do not use landlines anymore. It is wasted money. We will use our cells." "I do not have a cell." She looked up and tilted her head. "They confuse you." "Daniel said you did not want one. We can revisit later." I walked to the hallway and looked at the key hooks again. The emptiness had a shape now. It had a face, too. At noon, I heard the turn of a key in the front door, and the rain followed Daniel into the apartment in a smell of wet wool and cold air. He shook his jacket and set his keys on the console. They made a scratchy sound that I felt in my teeth. Sloane moved toward him and took his sleeve, and he leaned into her side and then straightened and came down the hall. "Hey," he said in the doorway, and he meant it to be light. It did not quite make it. "You have my keys," I said. He shifted his weight. He put his hand on the frame the way he had yesterday. We agreed to hold on to them, just for a bit. We did not agree, she decided. He looked back toward the kitchen and then back to me. "Mom, please, let her help. She has a degree in this. She knows how to set up structures. It is safer." "For whom?" "For everyone," he said. It hurt him to say it. I saw that. It did not change the shape of the words. "Last night," I said more softly. "I heard her on the phone. She said Tuesday. 3:00. Dr. Whitaker." Daniel's face took on a careful stillness. "We were going to talk about an evaluation. It is routine. It is not a big deal." "It is a big deal when your wife whispers about me like I am furniture to move out." He took a breath and held it. "We are worried," he said. "You have been forgetting. You hid your keys in the freezer last week." "I did not." "She found them there," he said. "She showed me. She put them there." His jaw tightened and then softened again as if he did not want to choose. He glanced at my wrist and the thin blush of skin where the coffee had kissed me days ago. He did not reach for it. "Sit with me in the living room," he said. "We can all talk." "I would like my door to open from my side," I said. He rubbed his eyes with his thumb and forefinger. After, he said, "Please." We sat. Sloane set out a plate of cut fruit and arranged napkins and stacked the mail she had already opened into an orderly fan. The couch felt newly more firm under me like it had been turned in the night. The clock on the wall marked quarter hours with a round wooden sound. Outside, a dump truck hissed and labored up the block. The radiator clicked twice in quick succession, then rested. Sloane spoke first. "Dr. Whitaker will ask you simple questions. It is painless. It is helpful. We all want you to feel secure." "I feel secure when my door opens," I said. "I feel secure when my sister can visit." "We can revisit that," she said. "We are trying to reduce triggers. That is how you stabilize." "Stop saying stabilize," I said. Daniel touched his knee like he was checking if it was still there. His voice came out tired and kind at the same time. "Humor us. 1 hour. Let a professional weigh in." The light outside thinned and the room brightened to compensate. Sloane's phone lit the table once. A name I did not recognize pulsed and vanished. She silenced the screen and folded her hands, nails pale and perfect. I felt the room the way you feel a new bruise, aware of it even when nothing touched it. I saw the cane by the closet and wanted Frank's hand on it instead of its hollow. I saw the dead red ring of the doorbell camera and wanted it to open its small eye and blink. The clock climbed through the hour. Sloane excused herself and drifted down the hall. Water ran. The radio murmured. Daniel sat with his hands pressed together and stared at them like he could make sense of what they were for. The key hooks by the door remained bare. The apartment gathered itself and held still. The bell on the wall between the door and the kitchen had a nice chime when pressed. It did not have to be loud to be clear. When it sounded, it filled the room like a note a glass makes when you run a wet finger around its rim. Sloane reached the door before the second chime. Her voice turned velvet. She ushered a tall man in a gray suit across the threshold like he was a guest at a holiday dinner. His briefcase was dark leather with a brass lock that clicked once when he set it down. "Dr. Whitaker," she said, "thank you for coming." He shook her hand and then Daniel's. When he turned to me, his grip was firm without weight, the kind of practiced touch you learn in rooms where you decide what happens next. "Mrs. Quinn," he said, "I appreciate your time." "My door appreciates a key," I said. "Mine." He glanced at Sloane, then back to me. He took a small recorder from his pocket and placed it on the coffee table. The red light came on in a clean circle. It reminded me of the doorbell camera that slept in a drawer. "For accuracy," he said, "we will keep this straightforward. Your family can remain present." The rain pressed its steady hand on the windows. The clock on the wall rolled past 3 with a soft wooden knock. Sloane folded herself into the end of the couch, perfect posture, hands stacked like nested spoons. Daniel sat forward with his elbows on his knees. "Can you tell me your full name?" the doctor asked. "Evelyn May Quinn, and your date of birth." I answered. He noted it neat blocks on a lined pad. "What day is it today?" "Tuesday." "Where are we right now?" "My apartment, Capitol Hill, Seattle." I looked at the empty key hooks, the one I own. He wrote again. His pen made a faint scratch that made me want to say too much. I kept my voice even. "Spell the word world," he said, "then spell it backward." I did both. He nodded as if we shared a small success. "Count backward from 100 by sevens." I counted. 72 came out clean, then 65. He made another small mark. He lifted his eyes kind and already thinking elsewhere. "Your family has concerns about recent changes. Have you noticed any problems with memory or confusion?" "I have noticed that my mail goes missing and returns opened. I have noticed that my bills are not where I left them. I have noticed that my keys are gone." Sloane moved her hand to her throat and let it rest there, a gesture that read as care if you did not look at the rest of her. Sometimes, she said, careful, she puts things in unusual places. "I found her keys in the freezer last week. I showed Daniel." I looked at Daniel. He looked at the coffee table. Whitaker turned the pad. "We will talk through some daily routines. We will also review what your daughter-in-law has documented. It is common for stress to present as forgetfulness." He lifted his briefcase lid and accepted the folder Sloane slid across like a practice dance. Photographs glossy and sharp. Me at the stove, mouth moving as I counted spices. Me kneeling by the low drawer, my face tight as I searched for a tin opener that had been moved. Me in my room with a hand to my eyes, the lens catching me through a crack I had not known was there. "There are also short video clips," Sloane said. "Moments that worried us." She tapped her phone and set it to play. In one, I opened my own purse twice, as if something would appear between one breath and the next. In another, I stood in the hall and touched the doorframe 5 times. The sound had been cut so it played like a silent film. The room watched a woman behave like she was trying to push her life back into the right shape with her hands. "Context," I said. I had to make the words small so it would pass through my teeth. "Show the minutes before you took those." Whitaker lifted a palm politeness in the shape of a wall. "This gives me a working picture." "Thank you, Mrs. Quinn." "Evelyn," I said. He shifted the recorder slightly. "Have you had episodes of anger or aggression?" "I have been pushed," I said. "I have been told that my mind is soft when it is not." I raised a voice to be heard in my own house. Sloane shook her head tiny and sorrowful. Last week she almost hit me with a cane. We all looked toward the hall closet where Frank's cane leaned. The wood held the place where his palm had darkened it. It did not lean in anger. It leaned because I had put it there to remember him. "Did you try to strike her?" Whitaker asked. "No." "She lifted it," Sloane said. "She did not follow through. It scared me." Daniel's knee bounced once and stilled. He watched Whitaker's pen. It made a small, crisp sound each time it met the paper. "Mrs. Quinn," Whitaker said, "I'm going to ask you to recall 3 words. Apple Clock River. A few minutes from now, I will ask you to say them again. Apple Clock River." He moved through tests that touched the edges of a person like a doctor tapping a knee for a reflex. I answered. Where my answers ended, Sloane was quick with stories that fit the frame she had built. The day I put sugar in the salt jar, the morning I walked into the hall in my slippers and said I was late for a shift I had retired from 5 years ago. None of that had happened. Her voice laid it down as if it lived in the seams of this place. Apple Clock River, he prompted later. Apple Clock River, I said. He breathed out long and quiet. The pad turned, the page changed. He lifted a set of forms from his case and smoothed them with 2 fingers. The red light on the recorder kept its round watch. Based on this evaluation and the clear documentation provided by the family, he said, I am diagnosing cognitive decline with paranoid features. My recommendation is a 72-hour hold for observation and stabilization. The room felt like it had been tipped a few degrees. The clock knocked another quarter hour against the wall. The rain did not change its tone. Daniel rubbed his thumb against his palm as if trying to erase something written there. Is that necessary? He asked. His voice was small not because he meant it to be, but because he had been making it small for weeks. It is the safest course, Whitaker said. The goal is clarity. The hold allows us to rule out other causes and adjust supports. I will arrange transport for the morning. Sloane let her shoulders fall the way people do when an emergency passes. Relief warmed her face. She did not smile fully. She let gratitude pull at the corners instead. She reached for Daniel's hand. He did not take it right away. After a breath, he did. There are also powers of attorney to consider, she said. Temporarily, of course, so we can manage bills during the hold. Whitaker flipped a page. The incapacity certificate will allow an interim financial proxy. That is standard. I watched his pen move. Each stroke cut a small channel through my days. He signed the form with a date that had been resting inside Sloane's whisper. He folded the pages and slid them back into the briefcase as if returning them to a place beyond my reach. Transport will arrive at 10, he said. I will notify the facility. Rainier Heights, Sloane supplied smooth as glass. He nodded without checking. He stood. He closed his case. He lifted the recorder and clicked it off. The room made no sound for a heartbeat. I will see you tomorrow, Mrs. Quinn, he said. I looked at the chip mug, where it sat on the mantel from breakfast, the chip now a small pale crescent near my eye level. I imagined placing my thumb in it and feeling steadier. I imagined taking the mug with me and the silly weight it would have in a place where everything is plastic. Whitaker left a card on the table and walked to the door. His shoes made no squeak. Sloane followed him, a hush of fabric and the soft press of the latch when it met the frame. The dead red ring of the doorbell camera watched a door it could not see. Daniel remained on the couch, hands on his knees, head bent. His mouth opened, then shut, then opened again. He looked at me and did not quite meet my eyes. It is just a few days, he said. In my house, I said days do not arrive with straps. Sloane came back in carrying a small duffel. She moved to my room and opened the closet. Hangers slid along the rod like a line of soft birds. She chose plain clothes and folded them square. She picked up the framed photo of Frank and me and considered it. She opened the drawer and pulled out a black and white copy I had made years ago and swapped them. The original went into the drawer under a sweater. The copy went into the duffel. You will not need much, she said. They supply basics. Leave the photo, I said. She paused, then placed the copy in the bag anyway. Her face gave nothing away. I stood and walked to the key hooks. I let my fingers rest on the smooth wood. My hand remembered the weight of the keys even when my palm was empty. Evening folded itself around the apartment. The jazz station murmured low and warm. The radiator clicked and then slept. Daniel went to the sink and washed a plate that did not need washing. Sloane zipped the duffel. The sound had the neat finality of a thought decided. I went to my room. I closed the door and leaned my head against it. In the hall, water began to run. A phone lit the dark with a square of white. Sloane's voice slid under the seam, soft as a hand. 10 in the morning, she said. Everything is set. From the kitchen, the old wall clock called the hour with that round wooden sound. In the hallway, a folded stretcher waited, straps stacked like quiet snakes. The rain steadied. The apartment held still. The siren wound up the hill and loosened to a sigh. Tires hissed on wet pavement. At 10 sharp, 2 paramedics came in with a folded stretcher that smelled of vinyl and rain. Rob Diaz was broad through the shoulders with tired eyes that still knew where to land. Eric Malone moved light on his feet, a clipboard tucked under his arm like a promise of order. Sloane met them in the hall with a soft voice and a face arranged for concern. Thank you for coming. She has been very disoriented. Daniel stood behind her jacket on hands empty. He looked like someone who had slept in a chair and woken to a task he did not choose. Rob nodded at me. Morning, ma'am. We will keep this smooth. Quick ride. Good care on the other end. My house is the care I said. Eric glanced at the paperwork on his board. We have a physician's recommendation and a transport order. We will help you to the stretcher now. The straps lay open like pale ribbons. Rob lifted one and it whispered against the nylon. He did not move fast. He did not move slow. He moved the way people do when they expect resistance they call routine. Daniel shifted to the side to give them space. Sloane kept her hand at her throat. I took one step back into the room. The cane stood by the closet wood, warm in the light. The blue mug sat on the mantel, Chip catching the morning and flipping it into a small crescent. The key hooks by the door were still bare. Mrs. Quinn Robb said, "We will secure your arms for safety during transport. Standard." "I am not a parcel," I said. He held my gaze. "I know." He reached for my wrist. I did not pull away. The strap lay across my skin, cool at first, then sticky as it warmed. The buckle made a small click. The sound entered the room and settled. "Excuse me," a voice said from the doorway. Nora stood there in a green raincoat that shed water onto the mat. Her short gray hair was damp and tidy. She held her phone in one hand and a resolve I had not seen in her small frame. "I need you all to hear something." Sloane stepped toward her. "Mrs. Patel, this is not the time." "Evelyn needs calm." "It is exactly the time," Nora said. She lifted the phone and tapped the screen. The little red triangle rolled across the bar. Sound came out clean and close, the kind that lives in a wall at night. Sloane's voice, soft, cautious, intimate with the dark. 10 in the morning. Everything is set. Dr. Whitaker signed the papers. We can close Friday. $285 in cash if he wants the keys Saturday. No one spoke. The building's old clock in the kitchen ticked twice, then waited. Rain touched the window with a soft hand. "Keep listening," Nora said. The recording continued. Sloane again lower with a smile in the words. "Send the revised power of attorney to my email. Brooke has buyers ready." Daniel's head turned toward Sloane. His eyes were steady. His mouth opened as if to speak, then closed, not from indecision, but to hold the first heat of a feeling that had no place to go. Sloane pulled her shoulders in. "This is out of context. I was talking about contingencies. Care's expensive." Nora swiped to a photo. The screen filled with a shot-through rainy glass of the parking area. Sloane's coat recognizable even through reflections, a folder traded to a blonde woman by a silver sedan. The phone camera had caught their faces clean enough. "Brooke Archer," Nora said. "Riverfront Realty, Tuesday evening." "Your cousin." Sloane's breath dragged in. "You have been spying on me. That is sick." Rob looked at Eric. Eric looked at Rob. They did not say a word, but the stretcher stopped moving. Rob straightened. "Sir," he said to Daniel, "if there is any question about consent or validity, we need to pause and contact our supervisor." Daniel spoke without taking his eyes off Sloane. Pause. Sloane turned to him. "Danny, listen. I did this for us. Your mother needs supervision. This takes pressure off you." Nora lifted the phone again. The recording picked up where it had left off. "He is easy to steer," Sloane said. "He will thank me later." Daniel flinched like he had been touched where he was not ready. He took a breath and leveled his voice. "How much did you pay, Whitaker?" Sloane blinked. Her lips parted. She chose a line and stepped onto it. "He is a professional. He reviewed the evidence. He made a recommendation." "How much?" Daniel said again. Silence stretched. The rain swelled and fell back. The refrigerator hummed and stopped. The red ring on Nora's phone sat steady as a heartbeat. 5,000, Sloane said. Daniel's face changed on that number. His eyes cleared not to anger first, but to the plain shock of seeing a thing that had been in front of him for weeks. He reached for the console table where his phone lay. Sloane moved faster than I had seen her move. She got there first and put her hand over it. "Do not," she said. Her care left her voice. Something hard showed through. "You will ruin everything." "Everything needs to be ruined," Daniel said. She reached with her other hand. Her knuckles caught my forearm where the strap exposed skin. The touch was not accidental. It did not have weight. It had intent. The cane gleamed in the corner of my eye. I stood up straighter and she let go. Rob stepped between us. "Ma'am," he said to Sloane, "back up." Sloane obeyed, but her eyes did not. She threw words instead. "This is madness. She has been wandering at night. She left the stove on. She almost hit me." "She did not leave the stove on," Nora said. And I have lived next door for 8 years. I hear everything this building decides to share. The only person who whispers like that in the night is you." Eric had his radio to his shoulder now. He spoke low and calm to someone in dispatch. Rob loosened the strap from my wrist and lifted it away. His hand was less professional when it touched my skin this time. It had a person in it. Daniel dialed with one thumb. He spoke clear to the operator. "I would like to report fraud and elder abuse. My wife arranged a false medical commitment for my mother." Sloan stepped toward him. He stepped back. She reached again, and he put his palm out. The touch was not hard. It was final. The first officer to arrive was a woman with a braided bun and rain on her shoulders. The second was a man with a mustache the color of tea. They took in the room like a single photograph. Paramedics, stretcher, older woman, son, daughter-in-law, neighbor with a phone held forward like a lantern. "Ma'am," the officer said to Nora, "you have recordings." "I do." Nora handed the phone over. Time-stamped, voice clear. "Nights of notes if you want them." They listened. They looked at the photos. They listened again. They did not move fast. They did not move slow. They moved in a way that told you the steps were familiar and still mattered. The officer turned to Sloan. "Is there anything you want to say?" Sloan lifted her chin. "I wanted to protect my family. I did what no one else had the courage to do." The officer held out her wrists. "You are under arrest for attempted fraud conspiracy and the abuse of a vulnerable adult." Sloan resisted enough to make it a scene without making it a struggle. Her breath came quick. Her eyes cut to Daniel. "You do not do this to me. I am your wife." He did not answer. His jaw worked once as if he were swallowing a stone. They read her rights. The cuffs clicked and settled. Nora kept filming on a second device she had not announced, not because she did not trust the moment, but because she had learned to honor it. As they moved Sloan toward the door, I said, "My keys." Sloan looked at me with something that would have been hatred if it had been more disciplined. She pulled the keys from her pocket and tossed them onto the floor with an ugly little flip. Brass scattered. The sound was bright. Daniel bent and gathered them and pressed them into my palm. They felt right again, familiar weight, cool and sure. I walked to the hooks and set them back where they had lived. They hung straight. The wood warmed around them. Rob spoke to the officers. "We paused transport due to doubt about consent and cause. We can submit the call audio and our reports." The officer nodded. "Thank you. Please do." Eric met my eyes. "Ma'am, I am sorry for the way we came in. You came in the way you were told I said." He looked relieved to be seen by the right word. He put the stretcher away. It folded into itself with a compact little sigh. Daniel stood with his phone in his hand and nothing to do with it. He scrubbed at his face once with his palm. When he looked at me, what I saw there had nothing to do with paperwork or structures. It had to do with the boy who once knocked 3 times on my door after school so I could know it was him. "I'm sorry," he said. I nodded. It was not a forgiveness, and it was not a forgiveness. It was a space where a person could begin to stand up inside himself. The officers asked me to sit and take a statement. I told them what I had heard, what I had seen, where papers had been, where they were placed and replaced. I spoke in pieces, and the pieces made a line. Nora added dates and times and small details like the kind of shoes Sloan wore when she went out to the parking area. Rob and Eric spoke to their supervisor by the door. A second car pulled up. A third. The hall smelled of wet wool and floor cleaner. The rain was steady and light now. The apartment felt bigger by an inch, like a window had been cracked that had not opened for weeks. When the officers led Sloan out, she turned her face to me. "You will regret this," she said. It did not sound like a threat so much as a habit. They took her down the hall. The door closed and held. The clock on the wall spoke the hour in that round wooden note. The room shifted. Daniel let out a breath in a single long ribbon. Rob looked to me one more time. "We will include everything we saw," he said. "If you need names for your records, we can write them down." "Please," I said. He took the clipboard and wrote in a clean block. He tore the page and handed it to me. His name, Eric's name, the time of arrival, the time they stood down. Nora put her hand on my shoulder and left it there. It was light and warm. She did not squeeze. She did not speak. The officer with the braid flipped open a small notebook. "Mrs. Quinn," she said, "do you wish to pursue charges against Dr. Whitaker as well?" I looked at the mantel where the blue mug sat with its pale crescent. I set my thumb in the chip the way I always did. The porcelain was cool, then warmer. The apartment held its breath while the officer waited with her pen. "Yes," I said. The officer's pen moved. The sound was small and final, like a lid finding its thread. Rain thinned to a mist by the time they left. Rob and Eric shook my hand and went with their stretcher folded tight. Nora hung back, saw my face, and put the kettle on without asking. Daniel stood at the window with rain on his shoulders that was not rain. We sat at the table while the apartment listened. The lemon smell was still there. It would fade. Nora poured tea. She set my blue mug in front of me. The chip found my thumb. Warmth eased into my hand, then my wrist. No one said the word safe. We let the steam do that. In the afternoon, the officers called. They had located Dr. Whitaker at his office near the hospital. They asked if I could come to the precinct the next morning to formalize statements. I said yes. After I hung up, Daniel reached for the folder Sloan had left and slid it across as if it might wake something if he moved too fast. "Let me fix what I can," he said. We took a bus to the bank. The lobby smelled of carpet cleaner and pens on chains. A television in the corner played muted weather and the crawl about traffic on I-5. The manager wore a tie with dots the size of blessings. He clicked a keyboard and scrolled and frowned. "These are micro transfers," he said. 40 here, 60 there. Easy to miss." "I miss them," I said. "We will flag the account," he said. "We can reverse what is still within the window. We will set up alerts to your number." "I do not have a cell," I said. Daniel exhaled and smiled at me without showing teeth. "We will fix that part too." The manager printed new cards and slid them across. The plastic smelled faintly of glue. He stamped a form with a heavy punch. Each thunk made the desk shiver. From there we walked to the locksmith. The shop had a wall of brass like a choir. The woman behind the counter wore a denim shirt and a gold hoop in one ear. She lifted my old deadbolt and weighed it in her palm. "You want something with a little more bite," she said. She held up a cylinder that looked ordinary and felt heavier. "This will do." Back home she worked quick. Metal on metal, the sound of a door, remembering how to keep its promises. When she turned the new key, the bolt sank into the frame with a quiet, confident click that went right down my spine. Later, Daniel took the camera doorbell from the drawer and set it on the counter. He got a screwdriver and looked at the backplate like it was a riddle he had been too tired to answer. He worked in neat motions, hands steady, breath even. The red ring blinked thought, then glowed a calm blue. "Leave it," I said, and did not explain what I meant. At the precinct the next morning, the air was dry and cool. Fluorescent lights hummed like flies. A fan moved paper on a corner desk. The officer with the braid welcomed us into a room with a table scarred by years of elbows. She set a recorder in the center and asked me to start from the beginning and not rush. I did not rush. Nora sat beside me with her notebook and dates and times. Daniel sat on my other side and looked straight ahead, hands folded the way he had as a boy at church. We said what we knew. We did not fill empty spaces with guesses. When Whitaker came in later, a different officer led him past the door. He kept his eyes down. He had no briefcase and no warm voice ready for a living room. He wore a suit that looked like it had been pulled on in a hurry. When he glanced up, his eyes slid away from mine. 2 weeks later, in a small courtroom with old wood polish in the air, a judge asked questions in a voice with gravel under it. People took turns. Nora showed her recordings and photos. Rob and Eric testified that they paused the transport. I told the judge about the night sounds and the phone in the hall, and the way Sloan set the world into her order and called it mine. Whitaker spoke at last, words thin as wire. He said he had made a bad call. He said he did not take cash often. He said he was trying to protect everyone. The judge listened without nodding. Sloan wore county gray. She did not look down. She stared past the judge to a spot on the far wall and built a life there with her eyes. When the sentence came, it came in plain language. It did not have to be loud to be heard. Something unwound in my chest that had held for months like a knot. You forget until someone loosens it with a thumbnail. In the week after, the apartment felt like it had taken a deeper breath. The sunflower magnets went back on the fridge. The beige curtains slept folded in a bag, and the old ones hung again a little faded at the edges, where the light had nibbled them. The smell of lemon cleaner faded to the honest mix of coffee and soap and rain-stiff coats on hooks. On a quiet morning, I rinsed the blue mug and placed a sprig of mint from Nora's pot inside it with water. A week later, the sprig had grown roots like threads. Daniel packed a duffel and a box of his own things from the hall closet. He did it slow and neat, folding and refolding until the seams lay flat. He carried the box to the door and then set it down and came back. He touched the key hooks and then his forehead like he was taking a temperature. I put my hand on his cheek. He leaned into it like you lean into shade after heat. "I am not going far," he said. "I know." In the afternoons, Nora knocked with 3 knuckles, a sound like someone rapping on a tabletop to call for a story. We drank tea at the little table by the window. She told me about the cats that live in the hardware store on Pike, and about the woman who paints watercolors of grocery stores at noon. I told her about the night Frank and I got lost in Ballard and ended up at a pier with a ferry that never came. When the clock in the kitchen clicked to the hour, we let it. The round, wooden tone filled the space between words and held. One day, the mail brought an envelope from a state board. I opened it over the sink. The letter said Dr. Alan Whitaker had surrendered his license. It spoke in formal lines and dates and numbers, no adjectives. I folded it and slid it into the drawer with the warranty for the new lock. Another day, a padlock clacked open on the storage unit in the basement. I took down a box marked Frank in my handwriting and sat on the concrete and went through what a person keeps. Programs from baseball games and a tie that never sat straight and a note he wrote on a napkin. I took the cane up and wiped the dust with a dishcloth. I leaned it on its hook in the hall where it kept its place without carrying any story it did not want. The doorbell camera chimed softly when the mail came or when a neighbor's package arrived. The blue ring waited like a small, quiet eye. The keys hung on their hooks with their worn teeth facing right. When I lifted them, they had the balance I expected and the clink that told me I was not mistaken. On a Sunday, Daniel knocked 3 times and let himself in with his own copy. He brought a paper bag that smelled of cinnamon and butter. He set it on the counter and took 2 plates down without asking which cabinet they lived in. We ate at the table while the rain returned to its old job. He told me about a place near the lake where the geese act like they own the path. I told him the radiator was making a new noise and he offered to listen. We did not hurry. After he left, the apartment settled. I rinsed our plates and left them in the rack to dry. I watered the mint that had taken root in the blue mug and brushed my thumb over the small pale crescent. The clock in the kitchen gave 1 clean knock at 3. I walked to the key hooks and touched the brass not to make sure, but because it felt good to feel something where it belonged. Outside, the clouds broke and a thin white square of sun found the far wall. Dust lifted in it like slow music. I opened the window a little to let the wet air in. The doorbell camera blinked its small blue ring. The room breathed. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.